Morning, Babaji.
Om Ganatimarandasyangarangana Salakya Chaksurin Militam Yanatashmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Sayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamanam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paridana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Scha Om Aganati Marandasya Garangana Salakya Chaksurun Miritam Yanatashmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yana Bhutare Shayam Rupakaramayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Siyata Parakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paridhana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhikanta Namostute Jayatam Surato Pango Mama Mandira Matirgati Matsavasha Parambo Jaradana Madana Mohano Sriman Rasa Rasaram Vamsibana Karsan Benushanopaka Gopinata Sri Sanam Dibyad Brindaranya Kapadrumada Srimad Radnagara Shima Shanishto Sri Sirada Shri Lagavindu Prasadavi Sevamanishmanami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Chajikaritaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Bangalam Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Gudhadrita Mangalam Padiri Kaksho Mangarayatano Hari Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate Om Mahadevi Chavidmahi Vishnu Padi Chadimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate Mahalakshmi Namastivyam Namastivyam Sare Sare Hari Pare Namastivyam Namastivyam Tata Kanchana Gauringi Radha Vindavanushari Vishabhanusute Devi Paramani Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Well, I got my two best men here, Rob on the right on Zoom and Brent on the left on Facebook. More to join, perhaps or perhaps not. Our question today echoed from Gajendra, who asks, why should I take shelter of the demigods? If you'll recall, the fight between Gajendra and the crocodile has already been going on for 1,000 years by the calculation of the demigods. The fight has taken place in the higher planets. The higher planets are the residents of the demigods. So all this time, the demigods have been in the stands, watching, witnessing. They have been reluctant to intervene. This is a very powerful crocodile. Not any ordinary crocodile could attack and gradually get the best of the king of the elephants. The demigods themselves are hesitant to get involved for fear that the crocodile will turn his attention to them, or that there might be other cousins or brothers of the crocodile in the water willing to attack anyone who would come to the aid of Gajendra. So for 1,000 years, the demigods have stepped aside. They've left it up to Gajendra. Lacking the backing of the other pachyderms, Gajendra was alone in this danger zone. The water had turned to foam. His friends had flown, and there was no one to phone. Not only lacking the backing of the other pachyderms, Gajendra's wives preferred to sit on the shore again as spectators. The other elephants over whom he was the king were reluctant to enter the water themselves because they didn't want to follow and be party to the same fate that was befalling Gajendra himself. So now we're at a point where Gajendra is asking, why should I take shelter of the demigods? What use of the demigods? What can the demigods do for me? The whole world revolves around demigod worship in one form or another, whether it's stated, whether it's explicit, or whether it's implicit. Everybody comes to this material world for the satisfaction of temporary material desires. And in order to fulfill that, they worship, either aware of it, consciously or subconsciously, they worship the demigods. Ishtan Bogani Boveda Dashanti Hoter Yo Bukdestin Evicha. Everything is created by God, and rather than staying in the spiritual world, remaining in our constitutional position as servants of the Lord and using everything to serve and to honor God in a proper way, because it all comes from God. It all is all owned by God, and God is the first right of enjoyment. The very reason that we left the spiritual world and came to this material world so that we could falsely claim ownership over property which did not belong to us in the first place. We didn't create it. We don't own it. We don't have the first right of enjoyment. And in order to fulfill those illicit desires, those separate desires from God, we appeal on one level or another to the demigods. The demigods' job it is to maintain this material world. They're in charge of water, fire, electricity, and they have the capacity to give us all those things that we need for comfortable living. Nitya, nityanam, chetanam, chetanam, ekyo, bhadidikam. Actually, all of that comes originally from God. But don't forget, the residents of this material world, they're not willing to acknowledge God. They're not willing to put God first place. They're not willing to honor God. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Therefore, between the living beings and the demigods, as a veil, as a cloud, you might almost say, obscuring the God who himself empowers the demigods, they act in the role of suppliers of all the material needs. So throughout the whole world, consciously or unconsciously, overtly or covertly, everybody worships the demigods for the fulfillment of desires. And Gajendra goes right in the teeth. He challenges the prevailing consciousness of this material world in this extreme life and death situation. Gajendra's innate, antique, ancient devotional service, which he had performed in his past life as Indra, is now coming to the surface, and he's now swimming against the tide. He's now bucking the status quo. He's questioning the very foundation of material life by saying, why should I take shelter of the demigods? Krishna is very adamant in the Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter. Kamas tasya ganaha pravadine tam tam niyamam niyata prakitashraya. Kamas tastaya. Those whose hearts are distorted by material desires worship the demigods. They follow the very elaborate rules and regulations for demigod worship. And as a result of their worship of the demigods, they get temporary material benedictions, which are of no ultimate value in due course of time. Sataya Shodhyaktas Tasharam. It says in the next verse, the faith by which people devotedly, consistently, and steadily worship the demigods, the faith by which they worship and please the demigods, and as a result of which they get the fulfillment of their heart's desires, that faith is given to them by Krishna himself within the heart. As a living individual soul, the Jivatma says, I want this, and I want to worship the demigod in order to get it. I want to worship the sun for health. I want to worship Lakshmi for money. I want to worship Parvati for a beautiful wife. I want to worship Shiva for a nice house and opulence and material influence. So when the living entity exudes, like a flower exudes a fragrance, that's what the living being desires. The Lord, as the super soul, seated within the heart of the living entity, right next to the living being, he detects that desire. He smells, so to speak, that fragrance. And then he makes the faith of the Jivatma strong so that one can worship Shiva or Ganesh or Parvati or Indra or Lakshmi or any of the millions of demigods. So in every phase of the process, we leave Krishna because we don't want to acknowledge and honor our creator, and we don't want to use his property to serve him. So we come to Krishna's created inferior world made of the material energy, and we play at being Krishna ourselves. Like a little child that wants to cook. They see the mother cooking, but the mother doesn't want to entrust the child with fire. So she goes to Toys R Us and buys a little plastic cooking set. So while the mother's cooking with real fire on a real stove in a real kitchen, the little child is play acting on a plastic cooking set. And so God creates because we don't want to worship God, we don't want to honor God, we don't want to stay in God's kingdom. We nevertheless end up in God's inferior kingdom in this material world, playing at being God. And you see how every aspect of our being is referent. The reference is God. Whatever we do is either for God or it's against God. So every living being in this material world pretty much worships the demigods. And Gajendra is saying, why should I do that? Why should I follow in the footsteps of those who are disenfranchised from the spiritual world, who, while created immortal, have fallen down, taken these material bodies, and subjected themselves to the vicissitudes of birth, death, disease, and old age? He said, that's what happened to me. I became subject to the curse of the sage, Agastya, and as a result, I had to be pushed down from the status of a king in one life to the position of an elephant in the next life. And as an elephant, I completely forgot about the prime duty of life, which is to revive one's God consciousness and to turn one's downward trajectory around and make it make upward progress back to home, back to God. I forgot about all of that. But now that the Lord has very kindly sent the crocodile to me, my original consciousness is awakened. I don't want to have anything to do with the demigods. After all, what have they done for me in the last 1,000 years? What could they possibly do for me? Now that Krishna is rumored to be in the area on the back of Garuda, because Krishna being in the neighborhood, now the demigods are getting a little emboldened. Just like a little boy who knows his big brother is just 2 minutes away, he starts talking big, acting big. He starts standing up to the other bullies. And normally he wouldn't do that, but he's empowered because he's gotten word that his big brother is just around the corner. So the demigods, who wouldn't on their own have had the audacity to step in to help Gajendra out, now the word has reached them that Vishnu is on the way on Garuda. So now they're all of a sudden getting all kinds of confidence, and they're each and every one of them offering, Gajendra, would you like me to help? 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 And Gajendra is saying, well, why didn't you help the last 999 years? Why are you stepping forward now? He says, I don't need your help. I'll just wait until Vishnu arrives on the back of Garuda. I was invited by Tucson Temple to go to Shivratri celebrations on March the 9th. Sundamani, the president there, said that that's one of their bigger celebrations. And I do a number of Shiva and Ganesh songs, which I got from MC Yoga with my own Krishnized. I Krishnized the MC Yoga Shiva and Ganesh songs to show how Shiva is in fact a great devotee of Krishna. Shiva is always standing by, eager to do the bidding of Krishna. You might say even Shiva is the takeaway energy of Krishna. Shiva destroys. He's charged with destroying. He's charged with taking away. He also gives. He's known as Ashutosh. Shiva, as you know, meditates in remote portions of the Himalayas, covers his body with ashes, and he chants the names of Krishna on his Rudraksha beads. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. He also has the reputation of being very pleased. He's known as Ashutosh. He's easily angered and he's easily pleased. So for material wealth and popularity and influence, many, many grossly materialistic people engage in all kinds of penances and austerities in order to please Lord Shiva to get their material desires fulfilled. And Lord Shiva very easily gives whatever one asks for without even analyzing whether it might be good or bad for that person or whether it might be good or bad for people in general. Because Shiva's fixed on devotional service to Krishna, and he doesn't like to be interrupted. He doesn't like his chanting, his devotional service, his sadhana to be interrupted. And so when someone comes and breaks his meditation on Krishna, he just says, yeah, whatever, take it and go. He doesn't want to be bothered. when someone comes to Krishna and asks for temporary material benediction, Krishna recognizes this is the reason that you're in the material world in the first place, because you want to illicitly and separately and unlawfully enjoy God's property. So Krishna considers very carefully whether he should award one's material desires. If one is starting back into the mode of devotional service and using things for Krishna's service, Krishna may award those desires to the devotee. But in many cases, he not only will he not grant the fulfillment of those desires, in the same way that a physician will not give his patient permission to eat those foods which caused the disease in the first place. That physician who is actually concerned about his patient will prohibit absolutely that patient in taking the very foods which caused that patient to be sick in the first place. A physician is more interested in flattering the patient, is more interested in stealing the money from the patient, draining the money. He'll tell the patient what the patient wants to hear. But that physician who's actually interested in the well-being and the recovery of that patient will prohibit that patient from taking the foods which have caused the injury in the first place. Shreyam nishreyasham nabhaktyam naratiyuro vanchito pi bishakta maha. So Krishna considers very, very deeply whether to or not accede to the requests of the devotees. And because he often does not give material benedictions, on top of not giving material benedictions, sometimes he takes away what you have because it has led to your being arrogant, complacent, condescending, and puffed up. People generally don't go to Krishna for material benedictions. They go to Krishna for love of God. On the other hand, they go to Shiva because Shiva doesn't consider whether it's good for them or bad for them. Shiva doesn't consider whether they're going to use that benediction for good or whether they're going to use it for evil. He just wants to get rid of them. He wants to get them out of his hair. The hair which he took the weight of the Ganges in order to save the universe. The poison that he drank. All of these services he did for the pleasure of his Supreme Lord and Master, Krishna. So he doesn't like non-devotees. He doesn't like materialists in his hair, in his space, bothering him and the place where he's doing his sadhana. Therefore, he's known as very easily pleased. And he's a great favorite for people to come and ask material boons from. Shiva very easily gives those boons because he considers them inconsequential. He thinks nothing of material boons and benedictions. And it is Shiva's influence or Shiva's energy who sometimes takes away material opulences from those who are on the devotional path. I heard a story the other day. A little boy was fishing at high tide, and there were a lot of fish, but they weren't biting. He was there for a couple of hours, didn't get even a nibble, even though the fish were there. And there was a more experienced older man nearby watching. Eventually the man came by, and as the tide was going out, the little boy assumed that the fish were leaving, and so he started packing up his gear. The older fisherman said to the boy, I have a suggestion. Put your line back in the water along with me. So all the time the tide had been at high tide, the boy had been fishing without any success, and the man had just been watching. The boy didn't get a single fish, single nibble. And the man didn't even bother to try. So you're starting to intimate that the man knows something the boy doesn't know, right? So the boy who's packing up his gear because the tide's going out and he's assumed fishing, the man said, now is the time to put your line in the water. So they put their lines in the water and they just pulling fish in, hands over. Every time the line hit the water, it would be another one. And the boy said, why is that? Tide's going down, the fish are leaving. The man said when the tide goes down, it stirs up the plankton. And so the fish get in a feeding frenzy. And that's the time. That's the time. He said, as far as ocean fishing is concerned, there's only one cardinal sin. There's only one terrible thing to do. not to have your line in the water when the tide's going out. But what does this teach us? Oftentimes, our character comes up when things are going out, when things are being taken away from us. When everything we do turns up roses, when everything we speak, every endeavor, every project that we embark on gets accomplished without any particular challenge or difficulty, we get complacent, we get stuck, we get addicted to a certain routine, a certain pattern. And we need to get dislodged from that place where we've been stuck. And it's the Shiva part of Krishna, the god of destruction, the god of winter, the god of death, the god of dissolution, the god of cosmic annihilation, whose job it is to take things away from us. He causes the tide to go out. Prosperity, money, influence. Oftentimes, these things come to us almost without our bidding them, without our seeking them. Sometimes they just fall into our lap with the slightest bit of effort. We just want it and it's there. And other times, though we pursue wholeheartedly with intensity, we can't make any headway at all. We don't get any money. We don't get any influence. We don't get promoted at work. In fact, other people get promoted over us. Our investments go down, lose money. There are seasons of our life which are like that. That's Lord Shiva serving Krishna by taking things away. Because it's when things get taken away, it's in the low tide, and we're challenged that we have to think in a new way. We have to adapt. We have to change. We have to get out of our rut. We have to reach down and find talents and abilities that we didn't know we had. We have to find talents and abilities that we would never discover in our seasons of prosperity, our seasons of abundance, and seasons of plenty. Krishna rewards us seasonally, but then when we get too complacent, when we get too comfortable, everything comes too conveniently, then it's time for a change of seasons, from summer to fall to winter, from Vishnu who preserves, we go along, everything's fine, everything's maintained with a minimum of effort, things almost happen by themselves. But after some duration, Vishnu steps back and Shiva begins to come in. Just like yesterday here in Utah, it was so balmy. This is the middle of February, it's unheard of. February is usually the coldest, windiest, snowiest month of the year. And so far it's been very mild indeed. I heard that on the slopes, there's plenty of snow for the skiers. They're having a good season. But down where we are, down at 4,000 feet, it's been very tolerable, and especially yesterday, there was a nice breeze, and the breeze felt warm. There were no clouds in the sky. The sun was shining. You actually felt that first promise of spring, that warmth on your head, that warmth on your cheeks. It was balmy. And the fish in the lake, let's see the lake behind me, the fish had woken up and they'd started to become a little active and moving around. They were a little hungry. The trees started to have a little buds on them. Vi pointed all this out to me, that the trees are budding, the fish are awake. And I said, well, I hope it doesn't freeze, because then the trees will get, they'll get hit, they'll get a reversal, the fish will get disoriented. And sure enough, today I look out and there's snow on the ground. So that means that Vishnu had given way, he had bowed out and let Shiva come. That fall gave way to a balmy fall, or balmy winter day, or what do they call it? Indian summer. What do they call it? Yeah, Indian summer is a warm day in winter. The Indian summer gave way to Shiva. Shiva's winter. Shiva the Lord of Destruction, the God of Disaster. If you don't invite him in, he's the party crasher. He's the old school mystic who's Christodalistic. He shifts my mind from a place that's materialistic to a space that's more holistic. He's the magnetic ascetic who makes my soul shine, awakens the snake at the base of the spine, third eye wide open, yoga pose. He focuses the mind so the petals unfold in deep meditation with breath control. He worships Lord Krishna by chanting his names as the Ganges drains to the sea. His bhakti flows to Krishna's lotus feet. Om Namo Shivaya, the flames get higher as the corpse gets burned in the funeral pyre. The soul never dies, so it won't expire when it's time to die. Just take off this attire, exhale to release selfish desire. May my soul aspire to shine brightly like Shiva Nataraj, whom I admire, dancing a demon in a burning ring of fire. Mahadev, you're said to be pure, auspicious, truth, conscience, bliss, creating, devastating, transformating. You save the whole world when you swallow the poison, you destroy bad habits, ignorance, and greed. You practice detachment, compassion, and peace. To the Lord of meditation who lives in the Himalayas, the king of all yogis, I offer these prayers. Om Namo Shivaya, Shivaya Nama Om. 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 So Gajendra asks, why should I immerse myself further into illusion by getting involved with the demigods who are now, curiously enough, stepping forward to ask if I need their help? I'm saying, no, thank you. I've got Krishna on the way. I don't, in fact, need your help. Krishna will not just give me what I ask for, but he'll give me what's good for me. It's interesting because now we're talking about Krishna and Shiva and interplay. The most popular Krishna temple in India, it's called Tirupati. The deity there is called Balaji or Venkateshwaran. Up until about 1000 AD, people weren't exactly sure whether this was an ancient Krishna temple or an ancient Shiva temple. So a great Krishna devotee named Ramanujacharya, he came to the Tirumala hills there. The temple is situated on a series of a mountain range called the Tirumala Range. The range represents Anantashesha, the serpent on which Narayan lies down and rests, the many-hooded serpent who provides a bed for the Lord and whose hoods protect the Lord from rain and sun, and also who sings the glories of the Lord with his thousands of hoods. He's been doing that eternally. So the Tirumala hills are compared to Anantashesha, and the ancient temple, which nobody even knows how long ago it was founded, sits right on the head of this series of mountains. Ramanuja came to there in about 1200 AD. He immediately recognized the sanctity of the whole area, not just the temple on the top of the hill, but the mountains themselves. And he didn't want to walk. He didn't want to tread. He didn't want the bottoms of his feet to tread on the mountain, which is Balaram, which is Lakshman, which is Anantashesha. So he went up the mountain to visit the temple on his knees. He went on his knees. Now, Jai Krishna and I climbed that mountain probably in 2009 or so. It's said to have 4,500 steps. It's like 5 miles from the town, Tirupati, at the bottom of the mountain, up to the temple at the top of the mountain. Took us, we were in good shape. I was running marathons. Maybe it was early, maybe it was more like 2003 or something, because I haven't run any marathons in this millennium. All my marathons were in the 90s and 80s of the 1900, 1990, 1980. Anyway, I was in good shape. And Jai Krishna's good shape, and he's half my age. So we made it up, I think, in about 3 hours. But it was quite a jaunt, and it's interesting because the whole approach to Tirupati, and this is the most popular Christian temple in the world, 50,000 visitors visited every day. It's about 3.5 hours northwest of Chennai. There's a train which pilgrims take called the Tirupati Express. Very comfortable train, nice upholstered seats, pictures of the deities all along the sides, and the loudspeaker in the train is pumping out devotional songs. Similarly, when you climb, there are speakers all the way up the mountain with devotional songs. And the whole mountain area is a game preserve. You'll see deer, you'll see lots of monkeys, all kinds of wildlife are there. It's a very chanting atmosphere. It's like reminds one of the spiritual world. No meat, no litter, no trash, no garbage. Everything up there is unlike much of India where people throw trash everywhere. If you throw trash on the ground on the Tirupati mountain, it's an instant 50 rupee fine. And if you can't pay the fine, they have a nice jail cell. You can cool your heels for the rest of the day. It's atypical of a lot of India, and it's clean, it's devotional. There are no restaurants at the top of the mountain that serve meat. There are all kinds of accommodations. There are free accommodations for pilgrims who are poor. There are very five-star accommodations for pilgrims that would like to, stay there in luxury. There's a Lodi Woodlawn, which is a chain of vegetarian restaurants all over India. So this is the deity who's called Venkateshwara. It's the most popular Krishna deity in the world. And the name Venkateshwara, the Ven means sins and Kat means cut. So Venkateshwara means one who cuts sins. If you take the trouble to climb the mountain, you appear before the deity with folded hands, you dedicate your mind, your words, your wealth, your energy to the Lord. At that point, he cuts the force. He cuts your sins, just like a thunderbolt can smash a mountain. Even though you come before the Lord with a mountain of sins, the Lord is so powerful that he can cut your sins, just like Indra smashes a mountain with his thunderbolt. As I said, 50,000 people visit every day. I've been several times. I have a good friend amongst the devotees there. His name was Hari Charan, and his family, his brothers and father, run a big construction company. They built many of the buildings down in Tirupati, and he had visited the temple every day for 27 years. He's known to all the priests. So he took a fancy to me, and he would get me in to see the deities within 15 minutes every time. Most people wait 6 or 8 hours in line. In any case, the deity is stunning. It's a large Krishna deity with big tilak, which in fact covers his eyes. He's decorated with the most valuable jewel in the world, and he stands with one hand facing in this way and another hand this way. One hand is pointing down, and the other hand is bowed out. And what it means is that he blesses you with this hand. He blesses his devotees with this hand. That the troubles of material life, he says, by virtue of your keeping God first place, by virtue of your surrender to him, that the ocean of suffering in this material world will only come knee high. You'll not be inundated. You'll not be submerged in the ocean of suffering. There'll only be enough suffering to keep you keen to get out of this material world. There will not be so much suffering that you're plunged into dysfunction, self-pity. Only the right, measured, exact, precise amount of suffering to keep you moving forward in your devotional path so you get back home, back to God. These are the messages that the two hand movements of the Lord are sending to the devotees. That if you surrender to me, I bless you with this hand, that the ocean of material miseries will not come any higher than your knees. Samshitaye pladaplavam mahat punyam bhamashara babambudir batsaro param param yabiparam natesha. Without Krishna consciousness, without the protection of Krishna, even if you're a favorite of one of the demigods, like Varuna, like Kuvera, like Indra, even if you're a favor of Shiva or Ganapati, still the demigods themselves cannot hold back the tide of material miseries. Even Shiva himself is obliged to invoke cosmic destruction periodically. Even Shiva himself, his name Shiva means one who wants the best for living beings. The cosmic situation comes to such a dire low point periodically that Shiva himself is forced to do the best good that he can to the living beings by destroying everything. He does his dance of cosmic destruction. The sun becomes 12 times hotter and everything becomes burned to ashes. There's a point at which there's no redeeming qualities, there's no virtue, there's no character, there's no compassion. The people are reduced to nothing more than wild, snarling, vicious animals by the end of the Kali Yuga winter season. So the best thing that can be done is destruction. Just like a parent, tries to do everything within their power to bring the child along softly, gently, to insulate them, to protect them from the negatives of this material world, to nourish them nicely, to give them good instruction, give them an education, give them everything they need so that they'll be able to keep material miseries to a manageable level. But where there's children who are disobedient, who are rebellious, who are envious, who are selfish, finding that the parent can only hit them or punish them or raise their voice to them or express anger to them doesn't mean that the parent has stopped liking the child. Doesn't mean that the parent now hates the child because the parent is shouting at the child, but it means that the child has left the parent with no other option than to be a disciplinarian, to cause the child to behave properly by force for that child's own good. So it's an irony that Shiva takes away and dribs and drabs the things that cause us to remain in this material world. He does this as the agent of Krishna because it's at low tide that we learn what it is we're made of. We discover talents and abilities that we didn't know we had. We take fresh approaches. We try new things. We get out of the old. We jar ourselves out of complacency. And that's exactly what's happening to Gajendra. He had everything going his way, lived in the heavenly planet. He was an associate of the demigods. He was on a first name basis with Indra, Varuna, Kuvera. He had other elephants who were big and strong as mountains as his protectors and his bodyguards. He had beautiful elephant wives and cute, adorable, enchanting little elephant children. He had grown up in the heavenly planets. He had the best of food, the most cooling of lakes, and all of this. And yet it took the crocodile, who represents Shiva, the god of destruction, the god who takes away things, to actually bring Gajendra's true spiritual, eternal nature back to the surface. Remind him that he's not a temporary being in this material world, but he's an eternal part and parcel of God, son of the Most High God, crowned with favor, with the DNA of champions in his vein, that his legacy was not to enjoy temporary power and prestige in this material world, but that now by the mercy of the Lord, all that's been pulled out from underneath him, and he's left with the truth that all that matters is Krishna and your relationship with Krishna. It's all that matters, the whole and the part. And the only question is, how will the part get back in sync with the whole? Krishna baliya se jiva bahira and taiva maya tare samsara dukkha. As soon as we forget Krishna, as soon as we think we don't need Krishna anymore, we still are totally dependent on Krishna's external, material, separated energy. Our whole life is referenced and defined by either pro-Krishna or con-Krishna conscious thoughts. We are indirectly dependent upon every Krishna for every breath, for every morsel of food, for everything that sustains us, and yet we fail to acknowledge that. And it often takes the Lord in the form of Shiva, the great destroyer, the Lord of destruction, the God of disaster, the cosmic dancer, to steal things away from us, to jar us out of our complacency and our condescension and our pride and our arrogance, and bring us to the point where we cry out, Lord, I have no other help. I have no other shelter than you. Devoid of his fabled strength, at the end of his rope's length, Gajendra's hopes turned to the Lord who awards protection to his devotees. He stopped pulling his leg, which the croc wanted to devour. And he plucked with his trunk from the muck of the lake a lotus flower and offered it, seeking the Lord's power. Krishna, you're the root of creation, the fruit of Vedas, the absolute truth, the ever existing youth who plays on your flute. Your lotus feet are adored by Lord Brahma, and Shiva will never leave you even for a beat. Your features are unlimited. You're the ingredient of all creatures, whether they have hands, claws, paws, or jaws. All are your parts and parcels. Those who are smart engage in your devotional service with all their hearts. They never depart from your sheltering breast. Lord, I confess I've messed up, repressed, my service failed the test, but I'm thirsty for your mercy, which is greater than any of my mistakes. I've heard that all it takes to awaken your mercy is a single cry of helpless affection. In spite of my shame, I'm calling your name in the middle of the fight. Please reclaim me from the might of the crocodile's bite. Lord, when I'm released from the teeth of the croc, block ignorance of my life and lock me under devotional service. Let my purpose rise once again to the surface. Lord, I'm knocking at your door. Please keep me close from now until evermore. When the Lord heard the eloquent prayers of the elephant, he steered Guru to the spot, and with his chakra, he sheared the crocodile's head from his body. When the reptile lay dead, and Gajendra was shed of his dread, he resumed the thread of his prayers and said, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. So that's our talk today. Oh yeah, and as a postscript, obviously you figured out by now that when Ramanuja made it to the top of the Tirupati Hills, he authoritatively declared that this is a Krishna deity, that this is not an antique Shiva temple. Of course, Shiva is a devotee of Krishna. Shiva seeks to serve Krishna, but that the Tirupati temple was, it was declared by the power and the vision and the purity of the world-class Saint Ramanujacharya to be a Vishnu temple, and therefore the deity was garbed and decorated and worshipped accordingly since the 12th century as Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna. He's known as Venkateshwaram, also known as Balaji, and we described the various positions of his hands in that worshipable form. We've had some uptick in action from having had only Brent on board when we started 4 to 5 minutes ago. We've had some others join board. Anjali from Phoenix, Garanga Devidasi. I don't know where Garanga Devidasi is from, but welcome. Let us know where you're from. Priya Krishnadas, whom I know is from New York, has been joining quite regularly. We're most appreciative of that. He's been with us for the last 3 weeks, a member of our crew now. Sundari Priya from Salt Lake City. Please come my obeisances. Namamrita Das, our priest here in Spanish Fort, Utah, with his wife Bhakti Janani and their daughter Nikunj. Thank you for your Haribo. Brent, who's back now from his yatra in India and full of enthusiasm, presumably, and full of creativity, has given us these rhyming words today. Gajendra's family and the demigods were not around when he was going down. They couldn't even throw him a line. Their benedictions didn't pass the test of time. I think he's got a lot of the subtleties that I was alluding to. He's made some nice innuendo in there that's very, very artistic. Gajendra's family and the demigods were not around when he was going down. They couldn't even throw him a line. Their benedictions did not pass the test of time. They just showed up when it was convenient for them, when they knew that Vishnu was right around the corner. Anjali says a Shiva rap out of nowhere. Well, I'm getting in practice. I'm getting in the mood. I'm getting in the mood for the Shivaratri festival in Tucson on March the 9th, Saturday after next. And Anjali further says, why should I immerse myself further into illusion? Yeah, it's kind of like interesting because yesterday in February, it was warm and balmy and the sun was shining. But if you thought spring has come, that you would have been deluding yourself. And the proof of it is that now it's cold and there's snow on the ground. There's snow on the ground. So if you think that there's a comfortable niche for you in this material world that you can snuggle in amongst family and friends and country and warm your hands by the roaring fire in the hearth in your living room of your 20-bedroom house, well, you're an illusion, because that's just an Indian summer. That's just a hedge against what is essentially an unlimited amount of suffering, tidal waves of suffering in this material world. You don't believe me? Ask the people in Ukraine. You don't believe me? Ask the people in Gaza. You don't believe me? Ask the people in Israel. Ask the people in Yemen. Ask the people in Africa. You don't believe me that this material world is an ocean of suffering? Yes, you've got a little temporary shelter, but it's not going to last any more than yesterday's warmth and yesterday's sunshine would last, because it's not January. I mean, it's not July. It's not August. It's not even June. It's February. So the nature of February is cold and snow. So don't be misled by some temporary respite. This material world is a place of suffering, an ocean, in fact. Some Sritaye Palavara. But the good news is, Deva Heshagunami Matamaya Mami Vayam Mayamitam Tarantite. That if you surrender, if you render service to He who is behind both the material and spiritual worlds, then He will bless you. He will bless you that the ocean of material suffering will stay manageable. It'll stay below knee level. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Samuel Maringo, thanks for checking in. Another poem by Brent Spencer. There is a reason for the change in season. Don't be afraid of the fall. It may be just what you need for the Lord to call. The winter is kind. Through it, your destiny just may be aligned. These are really, really beautiful verses. There is a reason for the change in. I hope you put these in a book. These are meditations. I think you can put the title of the talk, and by way of indexing the title, and then one or two notes about what the theme of the talk was, and then put the poems in there. And then when you've got a notebook full, then you can put them in a word processor so you can cut and paste. And then you can index them according to topics. And then you can use these in your own talks. And I also will use these kinds of nice rhymes in my own talks too. When you rhyme, use rhyme and alliteration, it helps people to remember, to retain what you're saying. There is a season for the change. There's a reason for the change in season. Don't be afraid of the fall. It may be just what you need for the Lord to call. The winter is kind. Through it, your destiny just may be aligned. Very nice. Anjali says, is visiting Venkateshwara as sweet as thinking of Krishna swallowing the forest fire? Madaram, 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 Nayaram, Madaram, Sahasaram, Madaram, Hridiyam, Madaram, Gamanam, Madaram, Madadadipatiyarakaram, Madaram, Madhura, Madhura Nam, Krishna Nam, Krishna Nam, Madhura, Madhura Nam, Sitaram, Sitaram. It's all sweet. It's all sweet. Anjali says, but where there are children who are, the parent has left no other option than to be as a disciplinarian. Yes, exactly. Lakshmi Nrsimha, yes, reminding us that Vaishnavanam Yata Sambhu, Shiva is the greatest devotee of Krishna. Bhai Bobby blesses everybody who participated within earshot today. The blessing of Bhai Bobby, and believe me, Bhai Bobby is very powerful. You want to get the favor of Vaibhavi, and you do not want to incur the disfavor of Vaibhavi. I've seen people who have disrespected Vaibhavi over the years, and no good ever happened to them. So consider yourself lucky that Vaibhavi's got her hand out today to all the participants in this discussion, and she's blessing all of us. May your problems never reach your knees, echoing the blessings of the Supreme Lord himself. Lakshmi Nishinga says, Krishna doesn't do things to me, does them for me. This is my mantra. Good to keep that always running around in your head, especially when things don't go as we had wanted them to go. Brent, again, sometimes it takes the destroyer to teach us that we aren't the enjoyer. Very, very to the point. That's good. Anjali says ankle deep is enough. Yeah, just enough, but not too much. All right. Okay, we've got a lot of comments, mostly thanks to Anjali, the queen of comments. But thanks too for everyone jumping on. From 2, we came up to quite a good number. And now let's go to Rob here and finish things off in a fitting way by seeing what Rob has to contribute to the poetry and the creativity and the depths of realization. So you're there, Rob?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Haribo.
Unfortunately, I don't have anything to really contribute today, but I'm grateful for everyone that has contributed. I'm on the road, so I wasn't able to get anything right down.
Okay. Well, thanks for being present. And Brent will carry the weight of the creativity today, and he's done a good job of it. So that's it for Transcendental Tuesday. We do have one of the operational managers of a security company which we've hired for the Festival of Colors visiting us today at 11 o'clock. Her name is Rhea Bronson, and we're going to go over all the security and parking measures that we've organized for the Festival of Colors. And then we have a summit meeting with the police and the health department and the county attorney and all this tomorrow, 11 o'clock in the county building, because they're meeting in their lawyer's office. Our own lawyer, Govinda Dev, has kindly agreed to come down from Salt Lake City and be with us. And Rhea, who will have been briefed today on the security situation, she'll be present and hopefully will very amicably thrash out the final details, pave the way to the police giving their approval to our application and getting the permit so we can move full force ahead towards the biggest and best and most ecstatic Festival of Colors that we've ever had, which is scheduled in March 30th and 31st. So that's what's looming for today. Tomorrow, I just thought I'd share that with you and incur your prayers and your wishes that may we navigate these next 2 days, which involve the police and the county attorneys and health department and all those hurdles that we have to overcome in order to get our permit. Please bless us that everything go very amicably and smoothly. This is not a time when we're planning for Lord Shiva. But what will come according to the infinite wisdom of the Lord. But that doesn't keep us from hoping that we don't have too much more aggravation ahead of us from the powers that be. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.